The morning sun rose over Crystal Spire Academy like it did every day. The tall silver towers caught the light and made everything glow. Daiho walked across the training grounds with his datapad in hand, checking his morning list. He did this every day before anyone else woke up. It was quiet, and he liked the quiet. Daiho was human. He worked in logistics, which meant he made sure everyone had the right equipment at the right time. It was not exciting work, but it was important. The academy trained warriors from all over the galaxy. Big warriors, strong warriors, warriors with claws and armor and abilities that Daiho could never imagine having. He was just the guy who counted weapons and ordered supplies. He stopped at the practice arena and frowned at his datapad. 6 training swords had stress fractures. He could see the tiny cracks along the blades. Nobody else had noticed, but Daiho noticed. If someone used these swords today, they might break. Someone might get hurt. He tagged them for replacement and moved on. The cubs would be training in an hour. Cubs, that was what everyone called the young warriors, no matter what species they were. 20 cubs in this year's class. 20 different species from 20 different worlds. All of them were stronger than Daiho. All of them were training to become the galaxy's greatest fighters. Daiho walked past the weapons storage and saw Ji-Wan already awake, practicing her forms. She was Kryn, which meant she had 4 arms and natural armor plates on her skin. She moved like water, smooth and fast. Every movement was perfect. She was the best in her class. Everyone said so, but Daiho noticed something. When Ji-Wan got tired, she favored her left side. Just a little. Just enough that an enemy might see it. He made a note on his datapad. Later, he would make sure the equipment on her left side was slightly heavier. Maybe that would help her balance. He moved to the next area and found Minho sitting alone, wrapping bandages around his small hands. Minho was Scarix, a reptile species. He was much smaller than the other cubs. Training was hard for him. He got injured a lot because the equipment was made for bigger warriors. Need help? Daiho asked. Minho looked up, surprised. Most staff did not talk to cubs. I am fine, he said, but his hands were shaking. Daiho sat down beside him. Here, wrap it this way. It will support your wrist better. He showed Minho how to angle the bandage differently, and I will put some smaller practice shields in storage room 3. They will fit you better. Minho's eyes went wide. You would do that? Why not? Daiho said. The equipment should fit the person using it. It seemed obvious to him. But Minho looked at him like he had said something amazing. 3 months had passed since Daiho arrived at the academy. His boss, Quartermaster Bryn, said he was good at his job. Bryn was Quellen, a species that looked like walking rocks. He did not say much, but he noticed things. He noticed that after Daiho organized the equipment better, fewer cubs got injured. He noticed that training sessions ran smoother. He did not know why, but he was happy about it. The instructors did not notice Daiho at all. They were too busy being impressive. Instructor Velthara was the most impressive. She was Kryn like Ji-Wan, tall and powerful with scars from 100 battles. She had trained champions for 40 years. Everyone respected her. Everyone feared her a little too. Combat Master Thorvik was another legend. He was Urgot, built like a mountain with reflexes faster than thought. He had trained 3 galactic champions. Cubs dreamed of training with him. Their families paid huge amounts of money just for the chance. The selection ceremony was in 3 days. That was when the cubs would choose their trainers. It was the biggest day of their lives. The trainer they chose would shape their entire future. Everyone was preparing for it. Everyone was excited. Everyone except Daiho. He had equipment to organize. Over the next few days, something strange happened. Cubs started coming to Daiho with questions. At first, it was just about equipment. Where can I find a heavier practice sword? Do we have shields with better grip? Can I get padding that actually fits? Daiho helped them all. He listened to what they needed and found solutions. Sometimes he had to order new equipment. Sometimes he just had to look harder in storage. Sometimes he made adjustments himself with basic tools. Then Cubs started asking different questions. Ji-Wan came to him one afternoon frustrated. I cannot get this drill right, she said. Instructor Velthara says I am not trying hard enough, but I am trying everything. Daiho watched her practice. He did not know anything about fighting, but he knew about balance and physics. Maybe it is not you, he said. Maybe your practice sword is balanced wrong for that move. Try this one instead. Ji-Wan tried the different sword. The drill worked perfectly. She stared at the weapon, then at Daiho. How did you know? Daeho shrugged. I just noticed the weight distribution was off. Hyunwoo came next. He was ergot like Thorvik, quiet and intense. I keep getting injured in the same spot, he said, showing Daeho a bruise on his side. Every training session, same place. Daeho looked at Hyunwoo's armor. This gap here, it is too wide. When you turn fast, it exposes your side. We can adjust the straps to close it more. They fixed it together. Hyunwoo stopped getting that injury. Nari was different from the others. She was Velen, which meant she looked like a huge lion that walked on two legs. She was aggressive and strong, but she struggled with control. I keep breaking equipment, she growled. Instructors say I am too rough. Daeho thought about it. Maybe you are not too rough. Maybe the equipment is too light. You are strong. You should use equipment that matches your strength. He found heavier training weapons made for bigger species. Try these. Nari used the heavier weapons and suddenly had much better control. She was not breaking things anymore. She was not too rough, she just needed the right tools. Word spread among the cubs. The human in logistics was helpful. He listened. He solved problems. He did not yell or demand perfection. He just made things work better. The instructors did not notice. They were busy preparing their presentations for the selection ceremony. Each instructor would show their achievements and philosophy. They would demonstrate their skills. The cubs would be impressed and make their choices. It was tradition. It had worked this way for thousands of years. 2 days before the ceremony, Daeho was reorganizing Storage Room 5 when Bryn found him. You need to attend the selection ceremony, Bryn said. I know, Daeho said. I will watch from the staff section. No, Bryn said. You need to stand with the trainers. Academy regulations. All staff above your rank must be included in the selection line. Daeho looked up. But I am not a trainer. I do logistics. Regulations, Bryn repeated. His rocky face was impossible to read. It is just ceremonial. Cubs never choose support staff. But you have to stand there anyway, Daeho sighed. Fine, do I need to prepare a presentation? Bryn made a sound like rocks grinding. The Quellen version of laughter. No, just stand there and look formal. It will be over quickly. The day before the ceremony, the instructors gave their presentations. Daeho was in the warehouse doing inventory, so he did not see them. He heard they were impressive. Velthara demonstrated combat techniques that made the audience gasp. Thorvik showed recordings of his champions winning their fights. 5 other legendary instructors displayed their achievements. The cubs watched with respect and awe. They knew tomorrow would change their lives. They had to choose wisely. They talked among themselves late into the night, discussing the instructors, weighing their options, making their final decisions. Daeho went to bed early. He had to organize equipment deliveries in the morning before the ceremony. He had no idea that his name had come up in those late-night discussions. He had no idea that all 20 cubs had reached the same surprising conclusion. He had no idea that tomorrow everything would change. He was just the logistics guy, and that was exactly why they needed him. The grand arena was full. Thousands of people filled every seat, from the bottom rows to the high balconies cut into the mountain. Military officials wore their formal uniforms covered in medals. Families of the cubs sat together, nervous and proud. Cameras floated through the air, recording everything to broadcast across the galaxy. This was the selection ceremony, and everyone wanted to watch. 20 cubs stood in the center of the arena floor. They wore their ceremonial armor, polished until it shined. Each one stood perfectly still, back straight, eyes forward. They had trained for this moment. Their whole lives had led to this day. Across from them stood the trainers. 12 legendary warriors in a line. Instructor Velthara stood tall, her forearms folded, her armor gleaming. Combat Master Thorvik looked like a statue, huge and unmovable. The other instructors were just as impressive. Veterans of countless battles. Masters of combat, the greatest teachers in the galaxy. At the very end of the line stood Daeho. He wore his formal logistics uniform, which was much less impressive than everyone else's armor. He felt uncomfortable. He did not belong here with these warriors. He was just filling a requirement. In a few minutes, this would be over and he could go back to work. The headmaster walked to the center of the arena. He was Velcrossian, ancient and wise, with silver scales that caught the light. His voice echoed through the arena without any microphone. Today the future chooses its path, he said. Each cub will approach the trainers. When they find the one they wish to learn from, they will sit at that trainer's feet. This is trust. This is respect. This is commitment. The arena fell silent. Everyone leaned forward in their seats. Jiwon of Kryn, the headmaster called. Make your choice. Jiwon stepped forward. She was the top student. Everyone knew she would choose instructor Velthara. It made sense. They were both Kryn. Velthara had practically announced that Jiwon would be her student. It was tradition. Jiwon walked slowly past the trainers. Each step was measured and careful. She reached Velthara and stopped. Velthara's face showed just a hint of a smile. She was already preparing to accept her new student. Then Jiwon kept walking. The smile disappeared from Velthara's face. Confusion spread through the arena. Whispers started in the crowd. Jiwon walked past Thorvik, past all the legendary instructors. She did not slow down. She did not hesitate. She reached the end of the line. She stood in front of Daeho. Then she lowered herself and sat at his feet. The arena went completely silent. It was the kind of silence that feels heavy, like the air itself had frozen. Daeho stared down at Jiwon. His mouth opened, but no words came out. This was not possible. This did not happen. Support staff were never chosen. Never. Velthara's face turned dark with anger. The other instructors looked at each other in confusion. The headmaster's eyes went wide. In 200 years of running the academy, he had never seen anything like this. Hyunwoo of Urgot, the headmaster called, his voice uncertain now. Make your choice. Everyone expected Hyunwoo to fix this. He was the second best student. He would surely choose Thorvik, his own species' greatest trainer. This would return things to normal. This would make sense again. Hyunwoo walked directly to Daeho. He did not even look at the other trainers. He sat down beside Jiwon. The silence broke. The arena erupted in noise. People shouted. Some stood up from their seats. The instructors began talking loudly. The headmaster raised his hand for silence, but it took a long time to get quiet again. Nari of Velis, the headmaster called. Nari walked to Daeho and sat down. The arena exploded in noise again. Minho of Scarix. Minho sat at Daeho's feet. One by one, all 20 cubs were called. One by one, they all made the same choice. They walked past legends. They walked past champions. They walked past the greatest warriors in the galaxy. And they all sat at the feet of a human logistics coordinator who had never fought a battle in his life. The arena was chaos. Instructors shouted protests. Important people demanded explanations. The broadcast commentators did not know what to say. This was not just unusual. This was impossible. This broke every rule, every tradition, every expectation. Instructor Velthara stormed forward. Her forearms were shaking with rage. This is an insult, she shouted at Jiwon. I have trained champions for 40 years. You dare choose a human with no combat experience? Explain yourself. Jiwon stood up. She looked Velthara directly in the eyes. She did not look scared at all. You taught me how to fight, Jiwon said clearly, her voice carrying across the arena. But Daeho taught me how to win. You showed me techniques. He showed me how to see problems before they become problems. You made me practice forms. He made me understand why those forms matter. Hyunwoo stood up next. The instructors teach everyone the same way, he said. Daeho sees each of us differently. He does not try to make us fit a pattern. He helps us become better versions of ourselves. Nari rose to her feet. She usually struggled with words, but now she spoke with surprising clarity. You all saw my strength as a problem to fix. Daeho saw it as something to use. He wanted to change me. He wanted to help me be myself, but better. Minho spoke quietly, but in the silence everyone heard him. When I got hurt, instructors said I needed to be tougher. Daeho gave me equipment that actually fit. When I struggled, instructors said I needed to try harder. Daeho changed the situation so I could succeed. Other cubs added their voices. They talked about small kindnesses, about practical help, about feeling seen as individuals instead of just warriors to be shaped. They described a pattern of behavior that none of the famous instructors had noticed because they were too focused on their own reputations. Through all of this, Daeho stood frozen. His face was pale. His hands were shaking. He had not trained these cubs. He had just helped them with equipment. He had just listened when they talked. He had just solved small problems. How had that become this? The headmaster approached. His ancient eyes studied Daeho carefully. The choice has been made, he said. According to Academy law, you must now accept or refuse. If you refuse, these cubs will be shamed and must repeat their first year. If you accept, you become responsible for their training. Deho looked down at the 20 cubs sitting at his feet. He saw their trust. He saw their hope. He saw young people who had chosen him not because he was the best fighter, but because he had treated them like people instead of weapons. He thought about refusing. He was not qualified. He did not know how to train warriors. This was crazy, but then he thought about what refusing would mean. These cubs would suffer for trusting him. They would be punished for making a choice they believed in. I accept, Deho said. His voice was steadier than he expected. The arena erupted again. Velthara made a sound of fury and stormed out. Several other instructors followed her, their faces dark with anger. But some stayed. Combat Master Thorvik remained, watching Deho with a thoughtful expression. A few other instructors looked curious rather than angry. The headmaster signaled for order. The bonding ritual will now proceed, he announced. Deho had to place his hand on each cub's head and speak the words of commitment. His hand was still shaking when he touched G1's head first. I commit to your training, he said, following the traditional words. I will guide your growth and guard your future. I commit to your teaching, G1 responded. I will follow your guidance and honor your wisdom. One by one, Deho repeated the ritual with each cub. Hyunwoo, Nari, Minho, all 20 of them. Each time the bond became more real. Each time the responsibility became heavier. By the time he finished, his legs felt weak. The ceremony ended. People began filing out of the arena, talking loudly about what they had just witnessed. Some were angry. Some were excited. Some were just confused. Everyone had opinions. Deho stood alone in the center of the arena as the cubs were led away by academy staff. Quartermaster Bryn approached him. That was interesting, Bryn said in his grinding voice. I have no idea what I'm doing, Deho admitted. You helped them for 3 months without trying to train them, Bryn said. Maybe that is exactly what they need. A trainer who does not think he knows everything. But I have to actually train them now, Deho said. I have to teach combat. I do not know combat. Then you will figure it out, Bryn said, just like you figure out everything else. Your first training session is in 3 days. He handed Deho a datapad. Training Hall 7 is yours. Schedule is loaded. Good luck. Bryn walked away, leaving Deho alone with a datapad and a problem much bigger than organizing equipment. He had 20 cubs who trusted him. He had 3 days to figure out how to train them. And he had an entire academy full of instructors who thought he had no right to be here. Deho looked up at the empty arena seats. The sun was setting, making long shadows across the floor. Somewhere out there, Instructor Velthara was planning her revenge. Somewhere, the galaxy was debating whether this was progress or disaster. And here Deho stood with a responsibility he never wanted and no idea how to fulfill it. But the cubs had chosen him. They had sat at his feet in front of the entire galaxy. They trusted him. He could not let them down. He would find a way. He always found a way. That was what he did. He just hoped it would be enough. Disaster. Military traditionalists were furious. They sent formal complaints demanding that Deho be removed. Progressive groups defended the cubs' right to choose. Arguments filled every news channel and political forum. At the academy, Deho had bigger problems than public opinion. He stood in Training Hall 7, empty except for practice mats and weapon racks on the walls. In 2 days, 20 cubs would walk through that door expecting him to teach them. He had no curriculum, no plan, no idea what he was doing. He spent the first night reading training manuals. They were full of combat techniques he did not understand. Terms like offensive rotation and defensive matrix meant nothing to him. He could read the words, but they made no sense. By morning, his head hurt and he was more confused than before. Quartermaster Bryn found him asleep at his desk, face down on a training manual. You cannot learn 40 years of combat knowledge in one night, Bryn said. Then what do I do? Deho asked, exhausted. Teach what you know, Bryn said simply. You are not a combat instructor, so do not try to be one. While Deho struggled, Instructor Velthara was taking action. She filed official challenges questioning his qualifications. She gathered support from other traditional instructors who felt insulted by his selection. They held meetings, signed documents, and built a case against him. Then Velthara found an old law, dusty and barely remembered. The trial by competency. If a trainer's methods did not produce results within a set time, They could be removed and their students reassigned. She brought this law to the headmaster. The headmaster did not want to agree, but pressure was coming from important military officials. The academy's reputation was at stake. Reluctantly, he approved the challenge. Daeho's cubs would be evaluated in 3 months. They would compete against cubs trained by traditional instructors. If they scored below the 60th percentile in any category, Daeho would be removed. When Daeho learned about the trial, his hands went cold. 3 months. He had 3 months to train warriors when he did not know how to fight. The challenge was designed to make him fail. His first training session arrived too quickly. 20 cubs filled the hall, looking at him with expectant faces. They believed in him. They had chosen him over legends. They were ready to learn. Daeho stood in front of them, feeling completely inadequate. He could not teach them to fight like Velthara could. He could not demonstrate techniques like Thorvik could. He was just a logistics guy who noticed small problems, so he asked questions. "Why did you choose me?" The cubs looked at each other, surprised. Trainers did not usually ask questions. They gave orders. They demonstrated skills. They demanded obedience. Jiwon spoke first. "You saw me as an individual, not just another Kryn warrior to fit into a pattern. What do you think you need to learn?" Daeho asked. Again, silence. This was strange. Instructors told them what to learn. But slowly, cubs began answering. Jiwon admitted she favored her left side and feared that weakness. Hyunwoo confessed that his technique fell apart under extreme stress. Nari acknowledged that her aggression led to tactical mistakes. Minho revealed that he took dangerous risks trying to compensate for his size. Daeho listened to all of them. He made notes on his datapad. Then he said something that shocked them. "You will design your own training program." "What?" Nari said. "Each of you just told me your weakness," Daeho explained. "You know yourself better than I ever could, so you will create exercises to fix those weaknesses. I will help you analyze what works and what does not. We will adjust and improve together." The cubs looked at each other in confusion. This was not how training worked. Masters told students what to do. Students obeyed. But Daeho was offering them something different. Control, responsibility, trust. When word of this approach reached the traditional instructors, they were horrified. Warriors did not design their own training. That was chaos. That was asking children to teach themselves. It would never work, but it did work. Slowly at first, then faster. Daeho brought something to training that the academy had never seen before: video analysis. He recorded every practice session. Then he showed cubs exactly what happened during their techniques. Not his interpretation. Not his judgment. Just what actually happened. "Look here," he told Jiwon, playing back a practice fight. "See, when you get tired, your left side drops 3 inches. That is when your opponent attacks. Now what could you do about that?" Jiwon studied the video. "I could strengthen my left side. Or I could use it as a trap. Make it look weak on purpose, then counter when they attack me. Try both," Daeho said. "See which one works better for you." For Hyunwoo, Daeho created stress training. He played loud noises during practice. He changed the rules suddenly. He added unexpected obstacles. Hyunwoo hated it at first, but his technique stopped falling apart under pressure. For Nari, he implemented a simple rule. Before every attack, count to 3. Just 3 seconds to think about whether the attack was smart. It drove her crazy at first, but her tactical mistakes dropped dramatically. For Minho, Daeho did something radical. He stopped trying to make Minho fight like a big warrior. Instead, they developed tactics that used his small size as an advantage: speed, agility, ability to move through spaces larger warriors could not fit. Suddenly, Minho was winning matches against cubs twice his size. Most importantly, Daeho changed how they thought about failure. In traditional training, failure meant punishment. Do the technique wrong, run extra laps. Lose a match, get yelled at. But Daeho treated failure as information. "You lost that match," he would say. "Let us watch the video and see exactly when things went wrong. What decision could you have made differently?" The cubs began training longer hours than required. Not because Daeho demanded it, but because they wanted to. They took ownership of their improvement. They watched each other's videos and offered suggestions. They solved each other's problems. The training hall became a place of collaboration instead of competition. Combat Master Thorvik started watching these sessions. Unlike Velthara, he had not joined the opposition. He was curious. What he saw surprised him. The cubs were not just practicing techniques, they were thinking, really thinking, about why techniques worked, about when to use them, about how to adapt them. Thorvik began meeting with Deho privately. "You do something I never managed," Thorvik said one evening. "You make them question everything. In my training, students learn to execute perfectly. In yours, they learn to decide perfectly." "I just ask questions," Deho said. "I do not know enough to give orders." "That is your strength," Thorvik replied. "You do not force them into a mold. You help them become their best selves." 6 weeks passed. The cubs were changing. They moved with more confidence. They made smarter decisions. They adapted to situations faster. Traditional instructors who watched them practice began to notice. These cubs looked different from normal students. They fought like individuals who understood their own strengths, not like soldiers following a program. But Daiho also knew the evaluation would not measure what his cubs had actually learned. The trial would test traditional combat forms, standardized scenarios, rigid assessments designed for warriors trained in conventional methods. His cubs were becoming excellent fighters, but they might still fail the test. One night, unable to sleep, Daiho walked to the training hall. He found Jiwon there practicing alone. "Cannot sleep either?" she asked. "Worried about the evaluation," Daiho admitted. "I do not think the test will measure what I have taught you." Jiwon smiled. "We know, but we do not regret choosing you. Even if we fail the test, you have made us better warriors, better than we would have been with any traditional trainer." "How can you be sure?" Daiho asked. "Because we think now," Jiwon said. "Before we just did what we were told. We memorized forms. We followed rules. Now we understand why those forms and rules exist. And more importantly, we know when to break them." Other cubs arrived. They had the same idea. Extra practice driven by their own motivation. They worked together, helping each other, pushing each other. Daiho watched them and realized something. He had not created great warriors by teaching them to fight. He had created great warriors by teaching them to learn. The evaluation was 1 week away. Instructor Velthara was confident. She had personally trained 20 cubs specifically for this trial. They represented traditional methods at their finest. They would demolish Daiho's group and prove that real training required real warriors as teachers. Daiho gathered his cubs one final time before the test. "You will not win by being better at traditional techniques," he told them. "You will win by being yourselves. Trust what you have learned. Trust each other. And remember, the goal is not to pass their test. The goal is to prove what you really are." The cubs nodded. They were ready. Whatever happened, they would face it together. They would show the galaxy what a human logistics coordinator and 20 determined cubs could accomplish when they stopped following old rules and started thinking for themselves. The trial was coming. Everything would change, again. The grand arena was full again. The same cameras floated through the air. The same important people filled the seats. But the mood was different this time. Nobody knew what would happen. Would the humans' strange training methods work, or would this be a disaster that proved tradition right? Daiho stood with his 20 cubs on one side of the arena. Instructor Velthara stood with her 20 cubs on the other side. The two groups looked at each other across the empty floor. Velthara's cubs stood in perfect formation, identical in posture. Daiho's cubs stood more relaxed, each in their own natural stance. The headmaster explained the evaluation. First test, combat forms. Second test, individual sparring. Third test, tactical scenarios. Each category required scoring above the 60th percentile. Fail anyone and Daiho would be removed. The combat forms test began. This was a standardized kata, a series of movements that every warrior learned. Perfect execution meant perfect scores. Velthara's cubs performed the forms like machines. Every movement was identical to the textbook. Every angle was exactly right. It was beautiful in its precision. Then Daiho's cubs performed the same forms, but they looked different. Jiwon's movements were slightly wider to accommodate her longer reach. Hyunwoo's stances were lower to match his center of gravity. Minho's forms were faster and tighter because of his smaller size. Each cub adapted the standard form to their own body. The judges argued. Traditional judges wanted to mark down Daiho's cubs for deviation from the standard. Progressive judges noted that the adaptations actually made the techniques more effective for each individual. The debate lasted 30 minutes. Finally, the scores came. Velthara's cubs at 79th percentile. Daeho's cubs at 62nd percentile. Daeho felt his stomach drop. They barely passed the first test. Velthara smiled, confident now. The individual sparring test began. Jiwon was matched against Velthara's top student, a Kryn warrior named Tarek. He was bigger than Jiwon and had perfect technique. The match started. For the first minute, they seemed evenly matched. Then Jiwon did something strange. She deliberately exposed her left side, the side she used to favor. Tarek saw the opening and attacked immediately, exactly as he was trained to do. It was a trap. Jiwon had spent 3 months turning her weakness into a weapon. The moment Tarek committed to the attack, she countered with devastating force from her right side. Tarek never saw it coming. The match was over in seconds. The arena went quiet, then erupted in noise. That was not standard technique. That was something new. Match after match followed. Hyunwoo faced an Urgot warrior who tried to pressure him with aggressive attacks. But Hyunwoo had trained under stress for 3 months. He stayed calm when his opponent expected panic. He won easily. Nari faced a Velen warrior who expected her to make aggressive mistakes. But Nari counted to 3 before every attack now. Her opponent kept waiting for the wild charge that never came. When Nari finally attacked, it was perfectly timed and controlled. She won. Minho faced a warrior twice his size. Everyone expected him to lose quickly. Instead, Minho moved through spaces his opponent could not reach. He attacked from angles that bigger warriors could not defend. He used his size as an advantage instead of a disadvantage. He won. Daeho's cubs won 14 of 20 matches. The scores came back 73rd percentile. They had not just passed, they had excelled. Velthara's face grew darker with each defeat. This was not supposed to happen. The tactical scenarios test was next. Both groups were given the same problems. Simulated combat situations requiring quick decisions. There were correct answers based on military doctrine. These tests had been used for hundreds of years. Velthara's cubs approached each scenario methodically. They identified the textbook solution and explained it clearly. Their answers were correct, disciplined, and exactly what the test expected. They scored at 78th percentile. Daeho's cubs looked at the same scenarios differently. For one problem, the textbook solution was a frontal assault with acceptable casualties. But Jiwon proposed using the environment to flank the enemy instead, reducing casualties to almost 0. It was not the expected answer, but when they ran the simulation, it worked better. For another scenario, the correct answer was to hold a defensive position, but Hyunwoo pointed out a weakness in the enemy's supply line that was not mentioned in the problem. If they attacked there instead, the enemy would have to retreat without any fighting. The judges ran that simulation too. It worked perfectly. Scenario after scenario, Daeho's cubs provided answers that were not in the textbook, but when the simulations actually ran, their solutions achieved better outcomes with fewer casualties. The judges faced a dilemma. By the rules, Velthara's cubs gave more correct answers. But by results, Daeho's cubs achieved better victories. The judges debated for an hour. Finally, they ruled that effectiveness mattered more than doctrine. Daeho's cubs scored at 81st percentile. They had passed all 3 tests. The trial was over. Daeho had won, but Velthara was not finished. Her forearms were shaking with rage as she stood. "I invoke the right of group combat," she shouted. The arena fell silent. This was an ancient rule, rarely used. If both parties agreed, the trial could be settled with a 20 versus 20 engagement, using full impact practice weapons. Real combat simulation. Velthara wanted to prove once and for all that traditional train inferior. The headmaster looked at Daeho. "You do not have to accept. You have already passed the trial." Daeho wanted to refuse. This was dangerous. This was driven by he could speak. Jiwon stepped forward. "We accept," she said clearly. "Jiwon," Daeho started. "We want to," Jiwon said. The other cubs nodded. "We want to show everyone what we have become. Not in tests. In real combat." The headmaster set the terms. Full urban combat simulation. Full impact practice weapons with pain sensors. No restrictions on tactics. The battle would end when one side was eliminated or surrendered. Medical teams would stand by. This was as real as combat could get without actual death. Both groups had 2 hours to prepare. Velthara's cubs used that time for equipment checks and physical preparation. Standard pre-combat protocol. Daeho's cubs did something different. They gathered in a circle and talked. Daeho had taught them to analyze and plan together. They studied maps of the urban environment. They discussed strategies. They assigned roles based on individual strengths. Jiwon would lead the diversionary force. Hyunwoo would coordinate communications. Nari would lead the aggressive strikes. Minho and the smaller cubs would use infiltration routes. Daeho listened but did not command. This was their battle plan, not his. He had taught them to think. Now they were thinking. The battle began. Velthara's cubs advanced in perfect military formation, controlling key intersections and maintaining discipline. It was textbook urban combat. Exactly correct. Daeho's cubs vanished. They split into small teams and disappeared into the simulated city. Minho led a group through drainage systems too small for larger warriors. Nari created distractions at 3 different locations simultaneously. Jiwon made aggressive feints that drew attention but never committed to real engagement. Velthara's cubs responded to each distraction with proper military procedures, which was exactly what Daeho's cubs expected. Every time Velthara's force regrouped, another distraction pulled them apart. Every time they tried to consolidate, they found themselves attacked from unexpected directions. It was not a fair fight. Daeho's cubs were not trying to outfight their opponents. They were outthinking them. They created situations where superior technique did not matter, because the fight itself happened on their terms, not the enemy's terms. 15 minutes into the engagement, Velthara's force was in chaos. Their perfect discipline had become a weakness. They kept following procedures while Daeho's cubs ignored procedures entirely in favor of what actually worked. Minho's infiltration team emerged behind Velthara's command position and eliminated their leaders. Nari's aggressive strikes kept the main force pinned and unable to help. Jiwon's diversionary team completed their real objective, cutting off all retreat routes. Velthara's cubs tried to regroup for a final stand. But they were surrounded, leaderless, and completely outmaneuvered. After 18 of 20 were eliminated, they surrendered. Daeho's cubs had not lost a single warrior. The arena was silent. Then Combat Master Thorvik stood up and began applauding. Slowly, others joined him. Within moments, half the arena was cheering while the other half sat in stunned silence. 20 cubs, trained by a human logistics coordinator, had just defeated 20 cubs trained by one of the galaxy's greatest warriors, and they had done it decisively. Velthara stood alone in the center of the arena, surrounded by her defeated cubs. Her shoulders sagged. For 40 years, she had trained warriors the traditional way, and in 15 minutes, a human who had never fought had proven there was a better way. Daeho walked onto the battlefield. His cubs were celebrating, but he went to Velthara first. "You are a great instructor," he said quietly. "Your students fought with perfect discipline, but they lost," Velthara said bitterly. "They lost to a different approach," Daeho said. "Not a better one, different. Your way teaches excellence. My way teaches adaptation. The galaxy needs both." Velthara looked at him for a long moment. Then slowly she nodded. The anger was fading, replaced by something else: respect, understanding, the beginning. The morning after the trial, Daeho woke up famous. His face was on every news channel across the galaxy. A human logistics coordinator had revolutionized warrior training. Some channels called him a genius. Others called him dangerous. Everyone had opinions. Daeho just wanted to get back to work. The headmaster summoned him to a formal meeting. Daeho expected praise or thanks. Instead, the headmaster said, "The academy is changing its training program. We want you to help design it." Daeho blinked. "I am not qualified to redesign anything. I just helped 20 cubs." "You helped them become something new," the headmaster replied. "Warriors who think and adapt. The galaxy needs more of that, but we cannot abandon traditional training either. We need to combine both approaches." The headmaster had another surprise. "Instructor Velthara has agreed to work with you. She will teach traditional combat excellence. You will teach adaptive thinking. Together you will create a new training system." Daeho had not expected that. Velthara had been his biggest opponent. But when they met later that day, she was different. The anger was gone. "You were right," she said simply. "I spent 40 years making perfect copies of myself. You spent 3 months helping cubs become themselves. I want to learn how." Working together was strange at first. Velthara knew everything about combat. Daeho knew nothing. But Daeho knew about systems analysis and individual development. Slowly, they found ways to combine their knowledge. Velthara would teach a technique. Daeho would help cubs understand when and why to use it. Velthara would demand discipline. Daeho would encourage questions. Something unexpected happened. Other cubs started requesting transfer to Daeho's training group. At first just a few, then more. Then so many that the academy had to create a new policy allowing transfers. Within 6 months, Daeho was training 60 cubs. Then 80. Each new group brought fresh challenges, but the core approach scaled perfectly. Jiwon and the original 20 cubs became teaching assistants. They helped newer cubs adjust to the different training style. Jiwon discovered she loved teaching. "I understand now why you asked questions instead of giving orders," she told Daeho. "Teaching others made me learn deeper." The academy appointed a review committee to study what made Daeho's approach work. They spent months analyzing training data, interviewing cubs, and observing sessions. Their report recommended major reforms across all Confederation military training. Traditional methods would remain important, but they would be supplemented with video analysis, individualized development plans, collaborative learning, and emphasis on adaptive thinking. Not everyone was happy. Conservative military officials fought the changes. They argued that traditional training had worked for thousands of years. Why change? They said humans were diluting warrior culture. They predicted disaster. The argument was settled at the annual Confederation War Games, a massive military exercise involving dozens of star systems. The Academy sent 2 delegations. One trained traditionally, one using Daeho's methods. Both groups were excellent warriors. Both groups completed their objectives, but the differences were striking. The traditional warriors performed exactly as expected. Competent, disciplined, predictable. Daeho's warriors did things nobody expected. They solved problems in creative ways. They adapted to changing situations instantly. They took initiative without waiting for orders. They achieved objectives that commanders thought were impossible. Military officials who witnessed the exercises firsthand became advocates for the new training. They saw that the galaxy did not need to choose between traditional excellence and innovative thinking. The best warriors combined both. Changes spread across the Confederation military, not just in training, but in thinking. Daeho's success inspired others to question old assumptions. If a human could revolutionize warrior training, what else could be improved? Other institutions began recruiting humans for areas traditionally dominated by other species. Human systems analysts transformed fleet logistics. Human psychologists revolutionized personnel development. Human educators brought collaborative methods to rigid schools. The pattern repeated everywhere. Humans succeeded not by being stronger, but by thinking differently. Daeho himself continued to grow. He never became a great fighter. But he no longer saw that as weakness. His strength was not in fighting. His strength was in seeing what others missed, asking the right questions, and creating environments where excellence emerged naturally. Jiwon insisted on teaching him combat anyway. The student teaching the teacher. It was beautiful symmetry. Daeho discovered he had natural aptitude for defensive techniques and tactical analysis, not because humans were better at these things, but because his civilian perspective gave him different insights about when and why to fight. He also maintained his identity as someone who never wanted to be a warrior. Unlike combat instructors who built their lives around martial excellence, Daeho remembered what it was like to have other priorities and values. This perspective made him a better trainer because he never forgot that cubs were people first and warriors second. 5 years after the selection ceremony, Daeho attended another one, but this time as an observer. His original 20 cubs had graduated. Many had become instructors themselves, spreading his methods to new generations. Jiwon now trained her own group of cubs. Hyunwoo had joined Confederation Strategic Planning. Nari led an elite combat unit. Minho designed specialized equipment for smaller species. All of them carried forward what they had learned. The current year's cubs stood in formation, ready to choose their trainers. The eligible trainers now included traditional combat masters and younger instructors trained in adaptive methods. Humans served as trainers alongside Kryn, Urgot, Velen, and dozens of other species. The academy had evolved into something that honored both tradition and innovation. As the selection proceeded, Daeho noticed that cubs no longer made uniform choices. Some selected traditional instructors because that approach suited them better. Others chose adaptive trainers because they wanted that methodology. Many chose instructors who combined both philosophies. The Confederation military was not becoming human. It was becoming something greater by incorporating the best that each species offered. After the ceremony, Instructor Jiwan found Daeho. 3 cubs had chosen her, all citing her demonstration of individually adapted techniques. "Thank you," she said, "for teaching me not just how to fight, but how to think about fighting." "You taught yourself," Daeho replied. "I just provided the space for that teaching to happen." "That was the lesson," Jiwan smiled. "That we all have the answers inside us. We just need someone to help us find them." Quartermaster Bryn approached with a familiar expression. He had a problem. New training equipment had arrived, designed for standard-sized warriors. But half the incoming cubs were from smaller species. Could Daeho review the requisition and suggest modifications? Daeho smiled and agreed. 5 years later, with everything that had changed, he was still the logistics guy who noticed when equipment did not fit properly. But now he understood that this attention to practical details, this insistence on individual optimization, this refusal to accept one-size-fits-all, these were not minor concerns. These were the principles that made excellence possible. He walked through the Academy's training grounds at dawn, watching the next generation of warriors beginning their practice. Some followed traditional forms with perfect precision. Others experimented with adaptive techniques. Many combined both approaches. All of them were learning, growing, and becoming warriors in their own unique ways. The galaxy had learned something important. Strength was not just about fighting ability or ancient wisdom. Strength was about seeing individuals instead of categories, about asking questions instead of assuming answers, about believing that everyone could excel if given the right support. 20 cubs had sat at a human's feet 5 years ago. They did it because they saw something that legendary warriors had missed. They saw someone who cared about them as individuals, someone who solved problems instead of creating them, someone who listened instead of commanding. That choice had changed everything. The Academy was different now. The Confederation military was different. The galaxy's view of humans was different, not because humans were superior, but because humans brought something valuable that had been missing. A different perspective, a different approach, a different kind of strength. Daeho paused at the edge of the training grounds and looked back at the tall silver towers of Crystal Spire Academy. Morning sun made them glow just like it did every day. But the Academy itself was no longer the same place where a confused logistics coordinator had stood 5 years ago, wondering why cubs kept asking him questions. He had not set out to change anything. He had just tried to help. He had just done his job, organizing equipment, solving practical problems, treating people like individuals. He had been himself, and somehow that had been exactly what the galaxy needed. A new group of cubs entered the training grounds, young and nervous on their first day. Daeho watched them for a moment, then made a note on his datapad. That cub in the back was favoring his right leg slightly. Probably needed different padding in his boots. And that one near the front had arms that seemed longer than standard. Might need custom weapon grips. Small D,